wanted to be here before we begin the end of the base game once again in New Game Plus 7. But I had thoughts about the DLC, but I wanted to give my own opinion on it. I normally have not much to say, as I'm sure everyone has the same feelings as I do with DLC. Difficulty is hard, unforgiving, makes me want to complain that they turn it down slightly, frame rate is killing my graphics, so on, so forth, but honestly, I found that I enjoyed it, even with all the slight hair-pulling, the infuriating moments, the triumphant ones. But having just completed the DLC, I wanted to share my thoughts on the journey I had going through it, even if I was voicing them throughout the playthrough of it. In all honesty, the DLC brought new challenges, intriguing lore to not fit it in a tight bow, but enough, and unforgettable battles that one could scarcely forget. While there were moments of sheer excitement, there were also areas that left me wanting more. So, what did I enjoy out of the DLC itself? The lore, first off, is on the back seat. And as we explore the realm of shadow, leaving us to decipher the implication of why we're falling, all that, we get a sense of why that is. We understand it, we follow through with it, we go from place to place, find every single notation of what we're doing here. We're here to find Miquella. Why are we here to find Miquella? To understand what he's planning, why he's doing it. And in honesty, the storytelling in that regard to the DLC, to me, was still as compelling as it was to the base game itself. At least to a point. And in case you're wondering, there is a spoiler to this, but I'm sure we've gotten to the point to where it's no longer a spoiler, and people have gotten past this, or at least are up to this point. Which, that spoiler is the complex relationship between Miquella and Erdon, and as I know, and I saw, and I'm sure other people saw, is that Vatividia most likely, and did, had made the connections and the tightrope stems from what was given between these two brothers. Though, granted, on that note from that, the boss fights themselves, especially with the climactic battle against promised consort Dawn, or even that of Mesmer the Impaler himself, were as intense and memorable, to say the least. To me, exploring every area was the go-to for the DLC. It's like the base game. You want to explore, you want to get better, you want to understand these fights. Base game, we had enemies that were mostly copy and pasted, but put in different situations underground, which to a lot of people, that was boring and there was nothing new. To a lot of people, they got something out of it either way. They learned that it was an enemy they fought before and they knew how to fight it. But to me, it was the final area that was the real treat of all of this in the DLC. Including every other area, but it's the final area that had the most intricate design the most secretive area in there, though I'm sure everyone will go, how is this all secret? You have to go look into it. And it added more depth to the experience one can find in it for the DLC. If they're willing to look for every single thing in the nook and crannies of this. But, in all honesty, I've never had issues with exploration in these kinds of games, or any kind of DLC with games like this. So long as they are filled with purpose and understanding of what they have. But, and I know that most people went through each and every area and felt that some of them were empty or lack thereof anything to do in it. It was basically barren to them because there wasn't enough of anything to pique their interest or anything that could get them to do something. If it was barren but beautiful, it told a lot of people, I'm not here just to be here. I'm here to just stare at it, and it's just art. Moving on. As with a barren area, there's no new NPCs to speak with other than the ones we initially talked with. Or if we did go out of our way, there were only a few we did find throughout our journey in the DLC. If anything, the DLC itself was honestly just giving us every turn to say their stories are given. It's up to you to find out how you wish to end it for them. Or something to that effect. I really couldn't say what was going on here, but it is what it is. But my overall enjoyment of the DLC as a whole, it was challenging. It was engaging to explore these areas. It was enough to give us the chance to grow strong once again in a new land that could be made to make us simply turn back at a given notice. And yet, that gnawing and nagging feeling one would have if they didn't finish this DLC, well, it just leaves something to be desired. And yet, that's the thing. Desire. What areas could have been improved for the DLC overall? And I know most people are like, ooh, the DLC is good in its own right. Some will probably say it's the perfect DLC. It's a 10 out of 10. It's everything is perfect and nothing is wrong with it. But that's the thing. There has to be critique. There has to be a reason for why they need improvement. Improvement is that to some aspects in the DLC itself, and this could be improved with the base game itself, was that it could have been better than what we initially had, or it could have been changed to what their original direction was. Now, I know I've seen probably the Miquella cut dialogue that still had dialogue with it. Ooh. But, the cut dialogue sounded like Ronnie's, and I'm like, I don't think they want to rehash what they had for Ronnie. I think that was just an idea they had. They were going with it. And in all honesty, they didn't. And I'm kind of glad they didn't go with that, because I'd be like, so he wants to make it like Ronnie. That's ridiculous. That is not good. But even then, we could look at the overall experience of it. When you first get into the Land of Shadow, or the Realm of Shadow as people will call it, your first instinct is find a site of grace. So you have a safe spot there, so you don't actually go, ooh, let me go here, let me go there, and then die, and then you're basically outside of the realm of shadow. You gotta touch the withered arm again, blah, blah, blah. And that brings up the point of difficulty. The difficulty spike when you first start out is apparent. You are at a high level already in the base game. You already do what you already have done. You leveled your weapons, you did all this stuff, and you go into the DLC area after beating Moog, which Moog, to you, was just the base setting of, hey, I beat Moog, DLC can't be that hard, can it? Well, take a guess. What I see in most of these reviews, what I saw in these reviews when I initially heard about them, was that why is it that I'm not doing enough damage to these guys at all? Why am I feeling like I'm under-leveled for this DLC? Why are the bosses so hard? Why are they... Why? In truth, it was never that you were under-leveled or weak with the weapons you improved on that you liked or hated or whatever. And it was never that. It's the fact that the DLC had a reason for why you were so weak in the first place. Why you were feeling underleveled, like you were back at level 1 when you first started the game. You are a Tarnished from the lands between, and were once graced by the golden boughs of the Erdtree itself. Light had faded from your eyes, the golden light. And when you went to the land of shadow, there is no golden light to speak of. There is nothing there of the Erdtree to touch. And in that moment, when you first step in there, you have the sense of feeling. You're not welcome here. You're a stranger to these forgotten lands, and while it's not outright said from the get-go, as soon as you take your seat at that first sight of grace, you notice the wording of Shadow Realm Blessed. And when you click on it, press it, or whatever, it tells you what you need to do. It doesn't outright say how much each of these Shadow Realm blessings take to your damage negation or damage given, or the weird spirit ashes that do something for you. It does, however, tell you that this will give you the edge you need. You don't know how by much, you don't know why, or what it's going to give, but you do know that it's going to give you something. Now here's the kicker. Most players, without even exploring, will head straight to the first thing they see to fight. And then they notice, oh crap, he's doing a lot more damage. How do I... And then you're dead. And you're back at the site of grace. You lost your runes you had on you. You go back to them. You ride Torrent to get away from the first thing you fight. Now that's not every enemy in the game. That's scarcely any enemy in the game. These enemies, they are akin to being the weakest enemy, which would be the soldiers you face, or something to that effect. To me, the first enemy I fought wasn't the dancer-looking guy. I cannot remember his name, but it wasn't him. He was later. It was actually the first mausoleum boss I fought, the Black Gel Knight. When I fought him, I saw how much damage he did. And this is on New Game Plus 7, and I am at a high enough level for any kind of New Game Pluses, regardless of what my stats were. But I got my butt whooped by him in only 2 shots, because I didn't know his moveset, and I wasn't going to fight him. And that's the thing. Most people will keep going again and again until they beat this guy without actually exploring the rest of the area or the rest of the map of the DLC. They won't go searching for any items until they finish that boss. Or that enemy that they couldn't beat the first time. And when they do, it's most of the time lackluster. And what you want to do is go explore. You want to explore, find shadow tree fragments or the revered spirit ashes that increase your damage negation, and or improve your spirit ashes. Because in a way, From Software and Miyazaki in general wanted you to fight these kinds of enemies the way they envisioned, the way they thought you would do. Now, that's not to say everyone won't do it, but that's the way most people feel. Well, they feel like, oh, I'm gonna not use my spirit ashes, so I don't have to do anything with them. I could just go get the shadow tree and fight everything on my own. That's fine. And I'm not here to talk about the leveling design of the DLC in a way of doing this. It was clear as day to most, if they had been keeping up with it, and overall, you had to explore every nook and cranny just to increase your damage and damage negation to incoming damage. But in any case, what is it that could have been improved to the DLC itself wholly? Well, to me, not much. The fights, though aggravating at times, were memorable, and every area that we explored was unique in their own way. And overall, whether you actually had a tough time with the bosses, or you actually just wanted to explore and do your own thing, you had an enjoyable experience throughout the DLC. If there is a complaint people have, myself included a bit, is that with each and every boss we encountered, with each and every fight we faced, I have to say that they were a bit aggressive. They felt a bit unbalanced mostly. They just can't be dealt with on your own at times. And even if you were good enough to fight them, you still used up every resource in your arsenal if you didn't understand the pattern of these enemies. You die once, you go back in, you learn their patterns until you beat them. And I will bring up the last boss. Most people I have read literally were losing their minds because of how difficult he was on their own. how painful fighting it was. And I didn't believe that comment until I fought him myself, or comments until I fought him myself. And I say myself, when in reality, when I fought him, he is difficult on New Game Plus 7. That is a fact. He is at the highest damage and highest health that he can possibly be, giving you the most damaging of difficulty you could face. But is he as painful as a boss I actually loathe and basically will have the NPC yell it out to the heavens above? Baal the Dread was more of a pain in the butt to deal with than promised consort Radon ever could be. And I could do it without for Baal the Dread. But if I want to do the DLC all over again and get every single remembrance item, I will actually have to do the DLC one more time in New Game Plus 8 and get the remembrance bosses I have not had yet. Go and get all the mausoleum, bell, hurdle things, all that. And I will have to just deal with Baal the Dread just as I did with Melania as well when I fought her a second time. Just, it is what it is. And I have no issue with the weapons that every single person has, and this is towards the PvP thing. And I'm sure everyone who's in PvP knows that some weapons will get a buff, and some weapons will get a nerf in a later patch we have after DLC. As they're probably working on it right now. And I'll tell you what day it is. It is the 2nd of July. Because I will know after this video goes live or whatever. People will look to the DLC weapons and not complain about them too much. Because they want certain weapons to be overpowered and win with them, blah 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 in PvP, and that's just fine. That's fine. You want to win your DLC bump stick, whatever. But if I know From Software, and I know they want to make it as balanced to the point where it's necessary as possible, but they screw up something along the way, they know and will give a piece of their mind about how certain weapons need to be nerfed and what is manageable to handle. But where does that leave at the end of all this? And that's the thing. Where does the ending leave? To me, the ending itself left me wanting more closure than what I and everyone else were given. There wasn't even a triumphant revolution at the end or anything. All we got was a memory of Miquella basically saying that there was a vow. I don't know what this vow was. I'm not much on lore as I should be, but this vow he had with his brother to make him his king consort, it really deters from the purpose. What was I supposed to be doing this whole time? I went here to go find Miquella. I find out Miquella used Mohg's body to bring back his brother Radon, make him his king consort, because apparently the fight that was happening with Radon and Melania wasn't even anything. It was a nothing burger at that point to me, because now it just tells me that Radon's old body was not strong enough, which seems odd because his old body held the stars together and stuff like that. And then he gets his new body, Moog's old body, and Radon now occupies it during our boss fight, with Miquella following him as Godhood has taken over, blah blah blah. I was impressed by the final boss. I was not impressed by how it ended abruptly. Like, it ends with us defeating promised consort Radon and a memory, and that's it. There's nothing else after the DLC other than go and search for the remaining shadow fragments and revered spirit ashes you have yet to collect, or at all. And to me, if you were up to this point with Radon searching for areas, fighting every boss you could, and that's all there is left to the DLC. If you had already beaten the game before and you beat the DLC, there's nothing left. Other than going into New Game Plus and getting the Remembrances skin. But does that mean that I had a problem with this closure? Not necessarily. I just had thought we would get something more than just a memory and a final boss that just does nothing other than say, you beat the DLC, move on. What am I supposed to take from this? That Miquella was already doing all of this just to make a gentler, kinder world he lives in? Where does that put someone? Do you go by what he says, or do you not? But that's the thing. It's never ever clear cut like it should be, and it never will be with Soulsborne games. If anything, it tells you this is never as dry and forward as it would be, like it was with Dark Souls 1 through 3, and it's still never straightforward with that. I sometimes think they do this on slight purpose so that we have a satisfying win over a boss and come to our own conclusions at that point, like I am right now. So, where does this leave the overall enjoyment of the DLC within my pedestal of games I've played and finished? Overall, the DLC, Shadow of the Erdtree, was a thrilling adventure that added significant value to the game. Lore to be there, lore to had, certain weapons, things for everyone to enjoy, as so long as they are willing to push forward and get them. And despite its few shortcomings that many of us have had with it, it provided memorable moments. Bale the Dread, Promised Consort Radon, Relana, the Divine Dancing Beast, so on and so forth, you name it. Areas that are unforgettable. And everything that you could think of. And that said, I'm looking forward to seeing the future content from Software and Miyazaki himself, or whoever it is that runs the reign after Miyazaki, that just builds upon this foundation they seem to improve from. And it shows. The bosses were harder, their fight was everything. We had to adapt, improve, like we always have with these Souls-Born games. Well, I've given my thoughts. I've given my ideas. I've given my opinion on certain things. I may have not gotten everything, but I know I wanted to get my thoughts out there. State my piece at this point. Still, time can only tell for what's to come in the future. Which leaves the past where it needs to lie. But does not mean it needs to end from there. So, on that note, as always, I'll see you guys in the next one.